Welcome to This is AI, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. We're going to show you, step by step, how to build, use, and master AI to create the most value for your business.
Well, hello, everybody. We are back again with another episode of This is AI. Just want to give you a quick reminder about what this podcast is all about, who West Monroe is, who we are, and then we're going to have a fun conversation today. So thanks for joining us. If you haven't watched our first episode, please check it out. We go more in depth about, this podcast, the topics that we want to cover, why it's so critical that we focus on the world of AI as a category, but generative AI in particular. This podcast is meant to be a series that digs into interesting topics from, the category to specific tools and use cases that we've addressed as an organization, signs in the market that we're seeing from both our clients that we work with and industry leaders, and kind of, our thoughts about the future of generative AI and where it might go. So it's going to be a fun series. There's more episodes coming. Today we'll talk about something very specific, but first, just a reminder: we're West Monroe. We're an international consultancy. We focus on kind of that convergence of digital technology and industry leadership, anywhere from healthcare and life sciences through financial services and many other industries. Check out our website, take a look at what we can do. We're always happy to have great conversations with people who are trying to solve really interesting problems, and we can not only help identify the strategy, we can help build the solution to take you into the future as well. Hi, I'm EJ. I'm a director in our Product Experience and Engineering Lab at West Monroe. And, I focus a lot on emerging technology and digital product. And I'm excited to talk about this stuff. Brownie, who are you?
I am Brownie. I am a bot powered by ChatGPT, Bard, Llama 2, and Windows 95.
This is our first live Turing test here. I disbelieve.
It's true. Ryan, who are you?
Yeah, I can't beat that. Ryan Elmore, Innovation Fellow, Head of AI, Data Science at West Monroe.
Rock and roll. And, what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about some fun stuff. In particular, we've seen, out in the industry, a lot of folks asking questions about what use case should I start with, or what platform should I use? What tool do I need to go pick out of the generative AI toolbox so that I can start rolling? And I think we have a unique perspective on how we have that conversation. That may not be the right place to start, is picking the tool out of the box. There may be a conversation before that, but why don't we get into that dialogue right now? Erik, Ryan, when we think about working with our clients, and I'll start with a little anecdote here. How are we seeing them approach this conversation around generative AI? I know that some of the conversations I'm having with folks in the market kind of start with, well, generative AI is a thing. We're behind. We see our competitors talking about using it. What's a generative AI use case that we can quickly get out in the market and show that we're using it? And I feel like that's the wrong place to start. I like the world of digital product, human-centered design, and the approach that centers around identifying the pain points or the jobs to be done for users or in your organization first, and then understanding what solutions exist to solve for those or to create gain opportunities for the end user. And perhaps generative AI is one of those solutions. But I'm curious what the two of you think. Maybe I'll go to you first, Brownie.
Yeah, I think over the last few weeks, couple of months, conversations are a little bit more grounded in, where the problems are and where generative AI might be able to be applied. I think it was so hype driven, right? I equate this to when we were first dealing with cloud computing, right? And everyone was just driving to that buzzword and wondering how they could move to the cloud. And so often we had to walk clients through how you do that effectively, right? Because we found very early on, like lifting and shifting isn't really going to be the most effective mechanism, right? Let's think about how we reimagine the products we're building, the platforms we're building to take advantage of the cloud in the right way. And I think rather than just taking a bunch of stuff we have sitting on servers and plopping it into the cloud infrastructure, it's not cost effective. It isn't the prudent way to really think about a move like that. And we're seeing the same. I think we saw the same thing. We're still seeing it to some extent with a hype around generative AI. So, anyway, I think that's why we're really trying to push towards the conversation first about where are you trying to go as an organization, and how can generative AI help solve it, right? I mean, I've heard things even such as, hey, I've got quality issues in my data, in my database. Generative AI, can I just point it at the database and can it solve the data quality issue? No, wait, hold on.
Wait, it's not magic?
It's not magical. It seems magical, but I think that's what's causing a lot of the confusion that we're trying to cycle folks through and drive to kind of a pragmatic approach. Ryan, I don't want to dominate this conversation.
Yeah, I usually recommend taking, I think on Hugging Face there's 339,000 models, is just do trial and error and go through every one of those and find the best. Yeah, don't do that.
Maybe don't do that.
That's not the way.
Is that sorting through every wrench in your toolbox?
Use all the tools.
Yeah, I actually had an interesting conversation this week. I presented to about 50 marketers, and kind of a different take on this was I starting to view these generative AI use cases similar to automation. Right, the way we view automation, and you have your TDD, technical design doc, and you have the individual blocks, and these two make this decision and then go to that. Each of those building blocks could potentially be overtaken by Gen AI. Some of the inputs, some of the outputs, but some of them actually use RPA. Some of them use ML. So looking at it holistically from use case, kind of what you said last week around stop looking at generative use cases, look at use cases. It really resonated with the group to kind of take that view.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I really feel like what I'm hearing here is, while generative AI may be, truly a disruptive technology in the space, it doesn't obviate the need for solid organizational and product strategy, clear assessment of outcomes or the objectives that you want to drive, basic understanding of your users and what they need to succeed when using your platform, and then fluency in the tools that are available to you so that you can, correctly choose the right solution to test and then potentially scale to solve your problem or attain your outcome.
Yeah, you almost said one key word there. You said organizational management. But if we put change in the middle of that, the OCM aspect is huge here. We're going to be changing how people work, changing how they're using tools, how it integrates into their day-to-day. So having an OCM strategy as well up front is, I think, critical for success of these Gen AI projects.
So I think for the folks out there who are listening, it might sound like we're saying, hold on with generative AI. Instead, you need to land your organizational excellence. You need to, have a solid product strategy. And sure, but I want to challenge us a little bit with I think a parallel perspective. Organizations also need to build fluency. They need to learn. They need to test. They need to ideate. They need to build proofs of concept. Obviously that's something that we can help them do. But when I'm an organization and I'm trying to think about how I invest in if I'm not going to pick a use case first, can I pick tech first? I think there's some guidance that we can provide on exploratory platforms, and I'll maybe start that conversation around, you don't need to figure out your entire future technology roadmap for generative AI, but you do need to make some choices about how you're going to invest. Are you going to, start with a tool-based approach? Are you going to use the things that OpenAI is releasing, that Microsoft is releasing? Are you going to build a bespoke solution and you have to look at the kind of technical mix in your own IT enterprise or engineering teams from, are you an Azure shop? Are you a Google Cloud shop? Are you, where have you placed those investments? I'm kind of curious, what guidance the two of you would offer clients who are saying, I know we need to get our stuff in order here before we start prioritizing use cases, and we'll get to that. But if I wanted to pick tech, how should I pick tech? How should I start investing in the learning cycle for this technology?
And I think I want to clarify something you said or alluded to, EJ.
Please do.
That is, we're not suggesting that you wait, right? In fact, we're suggesting the opposite, right? This is moving so quickly and it is so powerful. Move in, experiment, but do it in a calculated way. And that's really what we're trying to do with our clients. This accelerator that we have, within a few days to a couple of weeks, we try to identify use cases, requirements. What kind of data are we going to need? Are we going to need to fine tune a model? Can we accomplish it with prompt engineering? Can an LLM handle some of the need natively? Or is this not generative AI at all? We're still talking to clients that, for example, we recently implemented a solution in automotive claim fraud, identifying, potentially impactful, costly claims. That's not generative AI, right? So let's spend a few days, a couple of weeks, figuring out the constraints that help us make that decision. In healthcare, regulated industries, we're probably going to be using OpenAI deployed in Azure, or an open source model that we can control access to and security around, right? Because we don't want to be sharing regulated or proprietary data with a third party API. And we can also figure out, do we need to fine tune, right? Do we need to make and I think we'll probably talk more about that. So there's a lot of things that we can do in just validating calmly, pragmatically, the use cases and the problems that are out there to solve, and then which tools we might choose, if it's generative AI at all, let alone a generative AI tool, to move forward with the experiment.
Yeah, I think one of the drivers of everything you said there is cost, right? If it depends if you're going to be fine tuning, you need your GPUs. If you're going to be sending massive prompts across the board, it's pennies per 1,000 of tokens you send. If you're sending 20 or 30,000 tokens per prompt, it's going to add up pretty quickly. So balancing that is an important aspect too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, maybe something I'm hearing in there as we underscore the need to build velocity, to build fluency, and to not wait is you can take advantage of some of these bespoke solutions that are being provided. I think, you mentioned Brownie, kind of Azure's OpenAI architecture that allows you some more control over your data security and privacy, but you don't have to build everything from scratch. And really, you could do a little bit of build and start with your own instance of some sort of generative AI solution and focus on, more of the prompt engineering of your interface. How you interact with those, the data points that you're integrating, or providing, tools for your employees to start building fluency in the generative AI space, for sure.
I'm actually interested in what you guys think on, as we look at these use cases and where the opportunity is. At some point, just interaction with an LLM to drive human understandable and contextual conversation, all these LLMs are going to do that, right? If you don't need to submit proprietary data, just go with one of the main providers, right? It's easy to integrate with ChatGPT and Bard. We've done it a number of times, right? But when we're needing to supplement that interaction, right, with augmenting the interaction with internal data, domain-specific data, or training it, an LLM can summarize any publicly available content. But if it needs to do it in a language that is understood by physicians or scientists in a particular domain, do we need to train it, right? And then we're in regulated industries, so we probably don't want to do that with a publicly available API necessarily. I think it's going to be interesting to see where these things go. I think that the domain-specific value that we get out of either fine-tuning or augmenting a model with calls to internal data is going to push it to open source models or models that can be deployed in a controlled environment. I don't know what you guys are thinking in that area. I just read an article on that recently.
Yeah, so I view that from the competitiveness aspect of this. If everybody is using the same models, everybody's using it for customer service, it's kind of my same view on auto ML. If you just hit the big easy button and see what it spits out, everybody can hit that same button. So the differentiation is going to be adding in your custom flavor, adding in the way that your company culture talks and interacts. And that's really where that value for the individuality is going to come. because everybody's using the same LLMs. It's not going to differentiate.
I totally agree, Ryan. And I think one of the interesting things, and for those folks who are just listening, we will have a graphic up on screen here. But for those, and I'll do my best to describe it. But those folks on video, you can see we have a perspective around this sort of approach, I think, at West Monroe that helps inform this. And that's the idea of like a tool-based approach or a tool-focused approach, which might fall more in that camp of you're leveraging other LLMs, you're all boats are rising with the tide, so you're not really truly differentiated. And maybe those are the use cases where you're accelerating your day-to-day operations, right? You're allowing employees to generate high-quality emails, or you're responding to chat requests more effectively, or you're integrating, content sentiment analysis or generation in your tools in a more streamlined way. These are great things that everybody, I think, should use generative AI for. And you won't really differentiate there, but you will become better at doing some of the day-to-day work. And there is room, just to be clear, I think there is room for differentiation in the tool-focused approach. But really where I think some of that differentiation that I'm hearing from both of you comes is when you're talking about either a fine-tuned model or a custom-built model, plus your data, plus your process, plus probably some other solutions. It's probably a long chain of technologies that include custom structured data, perhaps unstructured data, probably some machine learning, certainly data science, generative AI at specific points along the process, and that really can unlock, I think, more of the bespoke value for organizations as they think about how to differentiate. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and we should probably spend some time talking about, we've been talking a lot about RAG, retrieval augmented generation. We've been talking about prompt engineering, fine-tuning. Like, the difference between these things is important. They're tools within, they're subsets of tools within the generative AI tool set, right? So I think prompt engineering can be really, really powerful, and it's relatively easy, but it's also going to be driven by the general knowledge, right? The general data that's been used to train LLMs, right? So if it's publicly available content, you can do a lot with that, right? And drive a meaningful conversation, answer common questions, all that kind of stuff. And you can prompt engineer it, as we did with our one of the chatbots we built in the healthcare space, to act role play, right? Act only as a representative for a healthcare plan in the example that we used.
I think an interesting nuance in what you're talking about, Brownie, when we talk about prompt engineering, is there is prompt engineering that is all about structuring your interaction with a large language model to provide the most effective output or series of outputs. But then there is also the optimization side of prompt engineering, where this is all using, to your point earlier, Ryan, compute power. This is all using energy and resources to generate this content. So optimizing your prompts, engineering them so that they are refined, effective, and not as costly as maybe large, long-form prompts over time. And you can do that through engineering. You can do it through, I think, fine-tuning and then integration of structured and unstructured data into the workflow as well.
And that, if you're focused on prompt engineering only, it's not trivial. It's an art to figure out how to do that, but it's more of a software engineering exercise, integration with an API, than it is a data engineering exercise, right? And then you get into retrieval, augmented generation, and fine-tuning, and then it becomes a little bit more of a data engineering exercise as you get into RAG, and even more of a data engineering, data science exercise as you get into fine-tuning. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to go through, take a stab at those definitions and when we use them.
Yeah, I'd love to supplement one thing there. You said the data science, data engineering aspect, but it's also the human aspect. We have one 100%. One of our coworkers is a psychology major from college. I was like, why are you in my data world? And then when she starts understanding how, because you think of how these models are trained, they're trained on human language. So comprehending and understanding how we think and how to just squeeze that information out in the right manner, having that psychological background is huge. And number two is around kind of the data governance aspect I think of prompt engineering around AI governance, of keeping yourself in the lane. Don't answer in these ways. Stay focused. Only be friendly. That's what we have in our chatbot. We did. So a lot of those guardrails to stay focused is really important in prompt engineering.
That's awesome. I know, I love the dialogue here. I'm going to pull us back to talking a little bit about use cases. What comes first, the use case or the tech? For those of you watching, you'll see on screen a case study. For those of you listening, we'll walk through it a little bit here. But let's talk tactically about how this kind of conversation shows up. We've been working recently with a global food and beverage leader, and their question at the beginning of the conversation was that question of how do we use generative AI? And, one of the things that they wanted to do was understand how it impacted their business. And we worked in partnership with them to kind of pivot that conversation back to, well, what are you truly trying to achieve from an organizational perspective, from a business outcome perspective? And, their synthesis of that effort was to create customer experiences that truly build loyalty and engagement. So, how do we do that? And how does generative AI play a part in it? We did a ton of work. Brownie referenced our accelerator offering. This was part of that offering that we worked with them closely to identify, over 85 ideas. These are ideas that would help them achieve that goal of creating really amazing customer experiences that build loyalty, and also explore the world of emerging technology, the category of AI and generative AI in particular. We did a lot of illumination on each of those use cases and boiled them down to about 8 really high priority and high potential use cases that could include generative AI, but more importantly, they were focused on problems to solve for the business. This particular customer was looking at, sentiment analysis as a key priority for understanding what their users need. To Ryan and Brownie's points earlier, that doesn't have to be generative AI. That could be traditional machine learning. That could be other sentiment analysis solutions. They're obviously looking at enhancing their service center chatbot to provide excellent customer service. And then there's this whole idea of contract summarization. I don't know about your business listeners, but contracts can be gnarly, they can be complicated, and you can see a lot of variability between them if you look across versions or you look across periods of time in the year and the contracts that you're creating. So what I hope you're seeing is that we were focused on 3 big problems to solve around understanding customer sentiment, helping ease service center experience, and then also providing an excellent standardized approach to contract summarization. We did find use cases for generative AI across those, but more importantly, we identified opportunity for the business to increase value, improve experience, and leverage a suite of tools that they have available to them. And we're talking about, an order of magnitude here. I mean, this is like 70 million in revenue growth potentially with these top 3 use cases, and about 30 million in productivity improvements. So kind of looking at the 2 dimensions of building value into your organization, and then also easing the day-to-day productivity burden that your employees experience. So just a cool kind of example of how you can have a discussion that might start in the world of how do I use generative AI, but it comes back to what problems are you trying to solve, what jobs need to be done, and then how can we leverage a really effective suite of tools that could include generative AI in a really cool way.
Yeah, EJ, I was just having a conversation around that contract aspect around the Microsoft contracts. Don't know if you've ever seen a Microsoft contract and what you actually get, what you don't get, how many users on these 300-page PDFs that they give you to be able to summarize that. And most places have multiple Microsoft agreements and contracts in place. So being able to summarize those, comprehend them, put them all into one output, here's exactly what you have in an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. Massive use case there.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a really interesting point, too, that helps you figure out, are we doing a build versus buy analysis here? Like, what are the tools out there that, for example, are there tools that do contract analysis? Spoiler alert, there's a few, but there's also a really great opportunity to build some cool stuff based on what kind of data you have internally. Sentiment analysis, I would probably put that in a strong look at what's out there category before you go build something from the ground up. But there still is white space depending on what you're trying to do as well.
Yeah, and I think these 3 examples that we landed on are really interesting, right? Because I would have the same inclination, EJ, on the customer sentiment analysis, right? All right. Are we looking at like social media data? Are we looking at just historical text and commentary and stuff like that? Well, yeah, there's tons of solutions out there that can classify what's said as overall sentiment. Now, LLMs, because they're trained on human language, they're actually really good at that as well. But
right.
You don't necessarily need to use them. So that depends on the context, and it could be a very simple API call. Service Center chatbot, well, that needs to be the chat. An LLM can do that for sure. But being aware of some of the history of common issues, right? In this particular case, it's for internal field users that are having maybe issues with their technology in the field. Think of folks around the world, around the nation delivering and trying to look at, potentially issues with some of their systems on managing deliveries and inventory. So maybe we do that with an LLM and RAG, right? Retrieving internal data about chat history and being able to use that as a mechanism to guide the LLM. Contract summarization, which you've alluded to. In this particular case, maybe it's relatively easy to find a solution that can summarize common points. But imagine this was a very specific contract, maybe in the medical field, right? Well, maybe that would need to be fine-tuned on medical data that's not available in the public domain. So I think these three examples could serve as great examples of thinking about, do we use an integration with an LLM? Do we use generative AI at all? Do we use retrieval augmented generation, RAG, and or do we use specific fine-tuning of these models, which is going to take more effort, data science background, that sort of thing.
Totally. Ryan, I'd love to get some final thoughts for you. And then I think I'm going to wrap us up here.
I was going to steal the MC role for a second and throw out the last option, which is buy. Go out and talk to a startup that's out there. And do we trust that they don't have a half-baked solution? And, hey, buy our product. And, we're going to build it side by side with you because you're giving us funding. Do you think that these companies that have been around for 6 months have a solid product and are able to answer exactly the questions you're looking for? Or is it kind of a starting point?
That's an interesting point. I feel like it is 100% a starting point. It's part of that world of exploration. As with many startups, you may uncover that diamond in the rough, right? That with a little bit of an investment, a little bit of guidance, can actually turn into, I think, something truly differentiated. As with most emerging technology trends, my guess is we'll see the horde of startups now, and they'll thin out rapidly, whether through acquisition or through obsolescence, in the next kind of 6 to, maybe 18 months here. But it's never wrong to at least explore the possibility, right? To see if there's a there.
Indeed.
Awesome. Well, I think maybe to kind of close us out here, I'm hearing a few things. We entered into this episode, asking the question of like, what comes first, the use case or the tech? And I think our answer is a resounding yes. You should absolutely be looking at, First, what are your priorities as an organization? What is your strategy, and where are the areas that you want to invest from an opportunity improvement or whatever? And that can help guide your decision making on kind of a tool-based approach, or maybe there's an opportunity for a more bespoke build. Either way, you should build fluency across your organization on how to use these tools, how to leverage generative AI in your organization. And then we should figure out a way, and that's something that West Monroe can certainly help with, but it's important for you to have a conversation around the prioritization of these jobs to be done, these pain points, these gain opportunities, so that you have an approach that you can then start evaluating technology against, whether that technology is generative AI or whether it's more traditional solutions like machine learning and data science, or perhaps just process automation and org structure change. Like, these are all things that can help fuel innovation and promote positive growth in your organization. So we talked a lot about whether we start with the technology or we start with the use cases. I want to take a quick detour and talk a little bit about how one might prioritize use cases. It's important to think about, of course, your company strategy, your company goals, your company objectives. Critically, as you can see on screen, it's important to document them. So here's an example of how we might work with you to sort of prioritize the goals that are most impactful for perhaps the next quarter, or maybe the next 6 months in your organization, or perhaps even the next year. So we're looking at 5 hypothetical goals here. We start with goal number 1 around increasing revenue growth. We move on to increasing customer satisfaction, improving new account acquisition, reducing customer churn, and then finally ending with improving resource productivity. So certainly goals that are probably applicable in a lot of industries out there, but it's important to know where the priority is so that we can help when we do use case evaluation against those priorities. So a pretty lightweight way to do this is putting together a matrix of evaluation. For those of you who are watching on video, you can see on screen a list of, let's say, 7 use cases. And perhaps these use cases are, from a larger body of ideation and exploration. You could have had 20, 50, 100, whatever, but through a process of ideation, exploration, and evaluation, we get down to kind of the most valuable. So let's say these use cases are the most valuable, in the list that we've identified from a proof of concept development standpoint or an exploration perspective. We take our aligned goals that are prioritized from the previous slide, and we kind of chart these use cases across those goals. So as you can see, for the folks watching, use case 3 fits squarely inside increasing revenue growth as a goal, increasing customer satisfaction, and improving new account acquisition. Those are our top 3 goals from the prioritized list. So there's clearly an opportunity there. Whereas perhaps use case 7, which only impacts resource productivity, our 5th prioritized goal, may not have as much impact from a goal prioritization perspective, but we should evaluate it from an impact to that particular goal. If it's small, maybe it goes in the backlog and we look at it at a later time because there's more important use cases right now. If it's significant impact to resource productivity, perhaps it warrants some conversation. So as you can see, this matrix helps you kind of evaluate where the heat is from a use case perspective, how it stacks up to the goals you have in your organization, and hopefully how those goals then support your business success. But this is a pretty lightweight, pretty easy tool that helps us have the right dialogue around selecting those use cases to explore, or those use cases where we might want to move on to building a proof of concept to evaluate value. So I think it's both invest in fluency and in the technology, and then clearly articulate where you want to focus as an organization so that we can start having that conversation around use cases and be prepared for the outcome to be maybe not generative AI at all, but maybe, just maybe, there's a cool solution and we could buy it off the shelf, we could customize it, or wow, there's a real great differentiator opportunity here for us to build something bespoke because of our strong data. I would maybe end with one of my favorite kind of phrases that I've been saying recently in conversations. I used it just this week at a client, and it's, if you are in an industry that creates content, summarizes content, synthesizes content, or gains insights from content, specifically text, you are squarely in the crosshairs for disruption or obsolescence due to the generative AI revolution, and you should be investing heavily in exploration and iteration of your products and services. My 2 cents, any closing thoughts, Erik or Ryan?
Yeah, I'll throw one out. I think if you're in the humor world, it's not quite there yet. I knew we were doing this episode, so last night I asked ChatGPT, finish this joke and answer it. Which came first, generative AI or the? And it said the programmer, because they had to create generative AI in the first place.
I mean, that's pretty dry. That's pretty dry.
So which came first? The programmer. That's who came first.
Fair enough. Brownie?
No, I think, again, I'll just reinforce, you got to start as soon as possible. You got to explore where this is going to impact your business in a positive way, but do that with a pragmatic approach and care, right? But it's certainly exciting what it can do and what the possibilities are. And on that note, I think we're going to dig into one example in more detail in the next episode. How's that for a segue? Good segue.
I think that's a great segue, Brian.
Yeah.
Well done. I feel well set up for the next. So coming up next, we are going to talk about a use case deep dive. We built a lot of things here. We've built stuff internally for proof of concept. We've built stuff internally for day-to-day use at West Monroe that leverage generative AI. And we're also building in partnership with clients. Next week, we're going to pick one of those that we've built, maybe two. We'll see how the time goes. And we're going to dig in. We'll look under the hood. We'll talk about what we built. We'll talk about how we built it specifically. And you'll see a multivariate approach that doesn't only leverage generative AI. And then I think most importantly, we'll talk about the why behind it. So thank you everybody for listening in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, friends.
Bye-bye.
Bye.